Native American legends are full of mysterious secrets. Researchers like to claim that these legends originate in pure superstition of the people. But very real evidence of cannibalism speaks a different language. What is really true about the legends, and do these entities still pose a danger today? Not an ideal world of the Indians. Today, we often have the impression that the world of the Native Americans was perfectly fine before the whites came. But in doing so, we forget, or we simply don't know, how cruel the history of many indigenous peoples really was in the past. Among the native peoples of the Northern Americas, harmony and peaceful living with nature were anything but. Many tribes fought each other to the death, wiped each other out, or entire peoples starved to death because nature did not provide their livelihood. In addition to these dramas, there was another circumstance that poses a great mystery to scientists to this day. The strange world of myths and legends of these people fascinates and frightens at the same time. Modern people like to claim that these peoples were primitive and stupid. But is this really true, or did the natives of this world know something else that we have forgotten? The spiritual world of the indigenous peoples is rich in mystical figures and gods. Above all stands the Great Spirit. In addition to fantastic legends about heroes and brave warriors, Native Americans also know cruel stories of demon-like peoples against whom even the bravest warriors often could not do much. The legend of the White Giants. Among the Choctaw, Nevada, Comanches, Manta, and Peyotes tribes, there are numerous stories to this day that tell of a ferocious race of white giants. These creatures, up to 3 meters tall, are said to have not been from our world. They had impressive abilities that made them invincible. Murdering and brutal, the white giants put large parts of North America in fear and terror. The ancients of the Choctaw tribe tell how these white powerful beings once settled in the territory of present-day Tennessee, having previously crossed the Mississippi River. In the Choctaw language, these beings were called Nahalo, which roughly means unfriendly or vicious. When the Nahalos arrived in Tennessee, a reputation for being aggressive and angry had already preceded them. This people used their superior abilities to cruelly oppress other peoples, and the Nahalos also fed on humans. Almost identically, Comanche legends tell of mysterious giant white creatures that were cannibals and preyed on humans. Comanche legends from the Great Plains also contain references to the origin of the cannibals, described as not of this earth. Even older legends tell of these creatures having once come from heaven. The white giant race was strong, courageous, and possessed magical powers. The Comanche shamans claim that the white giants were far superior even to today's white elite. The giants were not so bad at first. They were skilled craftsmen and built beautiful cities full of life. However, they forgot the meaning of justice and mercy. They lost the connection to the Great Spirit and developed into cruel monsters. Marauding, they roamed the land spreading terror and fear, but then their own abnormality became the white giants' undoing. The Dine or Navajo described the white giants as a superior race that had come to Earth to mine. In this respect, the stories are somewhat similar to the legends of the Sumerians, which tell of technologically far superior celestial beings, and some stories tell of how celestial beings would have used humans to exploit them in mining. Dine legends say that the white giants ruled all over the Americas. After evolving from a powerful force to emotionless monsters, they either perished or wiped out by an unknown force. Even in Peru, stories existed about these sinister entities. In Manta folklore, the giants arrived on large boats and then began to control the entire area. In the descriptions, they were huge beings with oversized eyes and strong limbs. The Manta go on to report that cannibalistic characteristics and deviant sexual habits led to the extinction of the giant race. Today, ethnologists suspect that the peoples of South America and North America saw in the whites arriving from Europe in the 15th century the return of this terrible white race. Fear led the kings and chiefs of the largest peoples of the Americas to offer gold and other riches to the Europeans in order to keep them peaceful. We know today that this behavior triggered a greed among the Spaniards that cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. If we know the legends of the white giants, it almost seems as if a collective nightmare was repeated for the indigenous peoples. Red Giants of Lovelock Cave. Also 10 feet tall were the red-haired giants who made life difficult for the Peyote tribe. This legend is particularly gruesome because cannibalism has been scientifically proven in this case. Although scientists could no longer prove that red-haired giants really existed, the remains in a small cave on the edge of Humboldt Sink in the U.S. state of Nevada spoke a language that could hardly be misunderstood. In the approximately 450 meters deep Lovelock Cave, numerous human bones were found, which showed clear traces of cannibalism. Similar to the white giants, the red-haired giants are said to have specifically hunted humans. Among the Peyote, the red-haired giants are known as Sitakar, and to this day, members of the tribe are terrified when they hear this name alone. The elders of the tribe tell how some Peyote warriors finally managed to outwit the giants and exterminate them. Locked in their cave, the giants were killed with smoke and fire. Numerous human bones were found in Lovelock Cave, but there is no trace of the giants. The cave is now considered a significant archaeological site. Anthropologists from the University of California have recovered over 10,000 artifacts around the cave and have largely reconstructed the lives of the people. In addition to numerous bones, primitive brushes, knives, and other tools were found. Analysis of the human bones revealed that the marrow was scraped out with knives and then presumably consumed. The bones also showed traces that allowed conclusions to be drawn that the flesh had been scraped from them. Despite these gruesome findings, enough bones were found that remained untouched. Therefore, experts now believe that Peyote ancestors temporarily became cannibals in times of extreme hardship. Later, the people processed this trauma by bringing to the world the legends surrounding the red-haired giants. The work at Lovelock Cave was led by a professor of anthropology named Llewellyn L. Loud. It took many years of research and work before the team was able to publish a full account of what really happened in the cave. The findings of the research team state that all human bones found were of normal size for that time period. The researchers did not find any evidence of height growth or bones that would have fit creatures 3 meters tall. However, the scientists had to admit that a large part of the cave was probably buried in the course of an earthquake in 440 BC. Therefore, at the present time, the experts cannot rule out the possibility that there are other relics deeper in the cave. Another circumstance complicated the work in the cave because when it was abandoned by people many hundreds of years ago, thousands of bats took over the premises. Today, the floor of the cave are covered meters thick with accumulations of manure and, for understandable reasons, there are no further efforts to dig in the cave. The Native American Wild Man. We end this journey to the most mysterious, ghostly creatures of the Americas with beings called Bak-Waz by indigenous peoples. In human mythology, these wild creatures are sometimes referred to as the kings of spirits, men of the sea, or Native American wild men. Legends about these demons are especially prevalent among the Kwakawak tribe, who still live on reservations in British Columbia. The Bak-Waz are ghostly beings that dwell in the forest and near water. They are said to care for the spirits of drowned people. Often, hikers claim to have sighted the souls of casualties in the forest or on the shore along with Bak-Waz. Occasionally, the Bak-Waz were also seen collecting shells on the beach, cracking them with their teeth, and eating them raw. Bak-Waz was generally described as shy of humans, but they will approach people who are lost in the forest and also offer to help them. One lost hiker, after being rescued, reported encountering a dwarf-like spirit creature that showed him the way to edible berries and drinking water. Another legend says that the Bak-Waz led people astray. When they have lured them into their dwellings, they offer people treats such as wild berries or dried salmon. But this is just a spell. In reality, the bewitched people eat insects, snakes, lizards, or rotten stuff. The unsuspecting person who eats the tainted food turns himself into a Bak-Waz and belongs to their tribe forever. Physically, Bak-Waz are sometimes described as very large and imposing. Other stories claim these mysterious forest people have long, thin bodies with strange eyes and long hair. In Native American ceremonies, the spirits are represented by shamans and dancers. The man wearing the mask of the Bakwas at first feigns shyness by covering his face with his hands. If the unsuspecting person then trusts the dark spirit, he sometimes seductively, sometimes devastatingly shows his true face. People of the New World. The genetic origins of the native peoples of the American continent have long been attracted the special interests of researchers. After all, on this continent, people have long evolved without contact with other peoples. Another continent that has long remained undiscovered is Australia. In 1492, Columbus, an explorer and cartographer sailing under the Spanish flag, first set foot on the South American continent. Australia was discovered by the English navigator James Cook on April 29, 1770. Both continents, as well as the remote island worlds of Polynesia, were therefore long considered the New World. In fact, however, these worlds and peoples are just as old as any other continents on Earth. The only difference is that people maintained little to no contact with ethnic groups on other continents. To this day, it is not entirely certain who was the first to discover the Americas. There is evidence of Viking settlements in Northern America. The first Norsemen arrived centuries before Columbus. Legends in the U.S. also indicate that Irish monks may have landed on the North American continent in the early Middle Ages. Nevertheless, these visits and the comparatively small and above all less successful settlements of the Vikings were of no further significance in terms of the genetic development of the native people. There was most likely no intermingling or significant cultural influence. The North American tribes were therefore long considered by anthropologists to be particularly pure and unadulterated. This is similar to the Aborigines in Australia and many tribes of Polynesia. For today's researchers, such peoples are interesting because they provide information about the developmental stages of the human species and the early migration of peoples. From Africa to the world. Today, we know that early man probably originated in Africa. More than 100,000 years ago, the first human-like creatures began to migrate. At least that is how the historical record sees it. In order to trace the migratory paths of the first human-like species on the planet, thousands of DNA samples, preferably from indigenous peoples, have been compared in recent decades. However, mixed cultures such as the Europeans or the immigrant North Americans have also been studied. On the basis of the gene strains, relationships between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals could be proven. Today, we know what a great genetic influence equestrian peoples such as the Huns had in Europe, and the genetic tests still allow conclusions to be drawn centuries later as to why some peoples are genetically more successful than others. The indigenous peoples of North and South America have some special features. For example, these peoples know neither beard growth nor chest hair. In addition, some diseases that are otherwise widespread almost everywhere in the world do not occur within these tribes. But the gene traces and the past of these people on the American continent are still strange for completely different reasons. The way of the people from Asia to America. Extensive genetic sampling showed that the native peoples of North America, who we now know almost uniformly as Indians, were all descended from Asian ethnic groups. More than 50,000 years ago, these people migrated across the Bering Strait to the Americas. The Bering Strait is a land bridge in the very north of America. There, Alaska borders Russia to this day. When people found the land route to America there a long time ago, the continental plates were probably much closer together. Even today, the path from North America to the Asian continent is a stone's throw. Today, however, the land bridge is limited to a tongue of land only a few kilometers wide. At the time of the Great Migration from North Asia to America, the connection was probably much wider. The theory, and also the evidence, that North American tribes were basically descended from ancestors originating in Asia was long consistent, and there was nothing special about it. Nevertheless, researchers wanted to know whether today's North American Indians had really been the first people on this continent. It would have also been conceivable that other people were already there when a wave of migration from Asia began. Especially the South American part of the continent attracted the attention of the researchers. Some tribes of South America showed striking peculiarities and deviations in appearance and skull shape, which questioned the relationship with North American peoples. In addition, the researchers hoped to find the most unadulterated human types in the south of the continent. The theory said that all humans migrated from the Bering Strait to today's Alaska, then to Canada, later to the area of today's USA, finally towards the Caribbean and South America. Researchers assumed that a steady influx of people from the north caused already settled tribes to move further and further south. Alternatively, the newcomers spread southward over established tribes. Scientists would have liked to confirm this theory through genetic studies, but then something happened that no researcher had anticipated. The mysterious population Y. Investigations among very primitive tribes in South America revealed that these people had almost no relationship to North American ethnic groups. But there was a genetic relationship to the Aborigines of Australia. Researchers found, however, no reference to the relationship of North American tribes with the Australians. How could this be? Moreover, the South American natives known as Population Y showed a very ancient gene signature. This made it clear that people related to the Aborigines very likely lived in the south of the continent before the immigration of Asian tribes. Now, one might think that perhaps at some point Aborigines landed on the coast of South America. But between the two continents, even 50,000 or 70,000 years ago, there was an ocean so large and deep that this can actually be ruled out. At these times, people are said to have just begun to use primitive tools. Shipping or even a boat did not exist at that time. People could not have any knowledge about navigation on the water, and a simple raft could not have survived the 16,000-kilometer crossing. Of course, it would be conceivable that people migrated from Australia to Asia and then across the Bering Strait to South America. But if that had been the case, the Aborigines would have left a gene trail in the north of America and also in Asia that can still be traced today. However, there is no evidence for this so far. It almost seems as if the people had arrived as if by magic 100,000 years ago from Australia to South America. Further tests necessary. The relationship between some South American tribes and the Aborigines of Australia poses a mystery to researchers. The relationship could be proved so far only with a few people. So far, not all Aborigines of both continents are willing to volunteer for gene tests of the whites. Currently, scientists are looking for more people to be tested to find out even more about the extent and possible explanations for this strange kinship. The Aborigines arrived in Australia from Africa as part of a wave of emigration 62,000 to 75,000 years ago. The land route was clearly traceable here. At that time, the water level was still lower, and between Asia, today's island archipelago, Indonesia, and Australia, there were land bridges at times. From Indonesia, it is still a stone's throw to Australia. Researchers also know from animal migrations that there was a lively exchange between Australia and Indonesia 50,000 to 100,000 years ago. For example, it has also been proven that the famous Komodo monitor, one of the largest and most dangerous lizards on Earth, has Australian ancestors. Now, no connections can be made between Australia and South America, neither from the flora nor from the fauna. Could sunken continents play a role? Some alternative researchers rumor that between Australia and South America, once a landmass unknown today could have been. Just as Atlantis is said to have once been located somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, legends say that the ancient continents of Mu and Lemuria existed in the Asia-Pacific region. Both are supposed to have been far older than Atlantis. Until today, these continents are pure speculation and scientifically not proven. Some alternate researchers claim that Mu was located in the Indian Ocean. Others think that Mu was possibly located somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. Lemuria, against it, is to have lain between India and Africa. Could now the strange gene tests be clues to the existence of so far unknown land bridges or even legendary primeval continents? We do not know it. Experts lead into the field that it would have come with the hypothetical assumption of a land connection or a large, further continent, presumably also to today still comprehensible mixtures of migrations of plants or animal species. But this is not the case. The Australian animal world is considered unique in the world. Let's just think of the marsupials, which are so unique to this continent. The only thing that is certain at the moment is that the people of the mysterious population Y did not reach South America via the Bering Strait and not through contacts with the North American natives. In 2003, a mysterious incident occurred in the vicinity of a Russian lake. The life jacket of a U.S. soldier, allegedly killed in an accident in Yemen, floated in the waters of Lake Bezodony, north of Moscow. But how did it get there? The case was the prelude to the whole new investigation into the big question of whether secret civilizations and underground connections between continents can exist on our planet. How did the vest end up in the lake? A village government employee was amazed when he found a U.S. Navy life jacket at Lake Bezodony near the Russian city of Solnechegorsk in 2003. The identification inscription showed that the find belonged to a sailor named Sam Belovsky, who had served on the USS Cole. The U.S. Navy destroyer had been blown up in an assassination attempt in the harbor of the Yemeni city in Aden on October 12, 2000. In that accident, 4 sailors were tragically killed and 10 went missing, including Sam Belovsky, whose life jacket turned up in Russia 3 years later. There continued to be no trace of Sam Belovsky, and the question arose as to how the life jacket had narrowly escaped from the Indian Ocean into a tiny lake north of Moscow. The distance between Aden in Yemen and Lake Bezodony is 4,000 kilometers if one were to use a dead straight air route. Some para-researchers came by this mysterious incident again on an old secret which, let's say, is not so secret at all. For it is said to have been known in some circles for a long time that there are tunnels in the Earth's interior that extend 1,000 kilometers and connect entire continents. The existence of such tunnel systems is supposed to be kept a secret for certain reasons. Of course, in this world, there are a lot of tunnels under the Earth and caves, which are quite normal geological formations. But in addition to them, almost on every continent, there is a whole series of paths and tunnels which are obviously not of natural origin. The main difference is the perfection and amazing accuracy of how shafts, tunnels, and passage systems were worked. In the Crimea, a marble cave exists in the Katar Dag Mountains at an altitude of 900 meters, which widens into a huge hall shortly after the entrance. Downstream is a tube about 20 meters long, which is probably filled half with boulders due to numerous earthquakes. Originally, this tunnel, which has remarkably flat walls, is said to have led deep into the mountains and eventually to the sea. The walls that are still visible today are in surprisingly good shape and show no signs of erosion. Otherwise, in this area, influences by flowing water change the limestone in a very typical way. But such traces are not found in this cave, which indicates that the walls have been specially worked. According to recent reports by Crimean speleologists, a huge cavity and tunnels have been discovered under I Petri Massif, which may have once connected the Crimea with the Caucasus. An expedition discovered other tunnels in the Caucasus under the Uvariv Ridge and opposite Mount Aurus, which led to the Crimean Peninsula and the cities of Krasnodar, Yeks, Rostov-on-Don, and the Volga region. One branch allegedly led to the Caspian Sea and the Krasnodar region. The Medveditsky Ridge is said to have once been a junction of tunnels. In the Caucasus, in the gorge near Geldinzik, a vertical shaft has been known for a long time, leading straight as an arrow and with a diameter of about 1.5 meters into the depth. The walls of this shaft, which can be proved to be several tens of thousands of years old, are so smooth that they could hardly have been formed naturally. In addition, the rock shows traces of mechanical as well as thermal processing. Here, and in other places where strange tunnel systems were found, the question must be asked whether these were created by humans or another intelligent life form. All in all, the secret tunnel network is said to have connected not only the Crimea with the northern regions of Russia. The further connections may have led as far as the New World and the North American continent. Secret tunnels in Western Europe, America, Africa, and Asia. On the border between Slovenia and Poland, Mount Babia rises in the Tatra Mountains with an altitude of 1,725 meters. Since ancient times, there have been stories that the mountain is an entrance to a secret labyrinth system, which is said to include tunnels to other worlds. Inhabitants of the village of Babia Gora claim to have once been in the passages themselves, the walls of which were also remarkably smooth, just as if humans had created them. The passage supposedly led to a hall from which several tunnels branched off. According to the legends, each tunnel leads from here to different worlds. Worlds can also be understood as other countries and continents. In England, not so long ago, miners building a tunnel found a staircase in the depths that led to a well from which strange sounds came. The well reached unusually deep into the earth, and it was not entirely clear whether it actually served to extract water or had once been a kind of connecting shaft. In North America, researchers found very similar installations. Tunnels leading down arrow-straight halls with branching tunnels or well-like structures that may be further shafts to tunnel systems. At Mount Shasta in California, there is a network of nodes where various mines converge. In truth, the mines are said to be far more than just legacies of mining. Married couple Iris and Nick Marshall found a cave near the small California town of Bishop in a mountainous area called Caso Diablo, whose walls and floor were as unusually smooth as if they had been polished to a shine. In addition, the couple credibly reported hieroglyphic-like writing on the walls. One of the walls was even said to have small holes from which faint rays of light streamed. After strange noises were heard in the cave, the couple fled and later failed to find the entrance to the cave. In 1980, again not far from the coast of California, a huge cavity was discovered extending several hundred meters into the interior of the continent. A similar construct is said to exist in Idaho. This was explored and documented by anthropologist James McKean, among others. In Mexico, the ancient cave Santano de la Golondrinas gave rise to speculation. More than a kilometer deep and several hundred meters wide, the steep, flat, and smooth walls reach into the depth. There, researchers encountered a network of rooms, passages, tunnels, and branches. This could also be an ancient hub of intercontinental tunnels. In South America, striking tunnels are known to exist in Peru's Nazca Desert, Ecuador, and Chile. In addition, dozens of stories exist in these countries about underground cities and entire civilizations that are said to live, or once lived, in the Earth's interior. Some of the caves and passage systems known so far in South America are marked with the simplest drawings, which means that they were inhabited or used at times by primitive cultures. The drawings are clues to the unusual age of the passages. In South America, too, a number of tunnels are known whose walls are so smooth that they look like mirrors. In Southeast Asia, researchers have long suspected that the famous mystical place of Shambhala is actually underground in Tibet. The Tibetan tunnel systems are said to be guarded and protected by Buddhist monks today. There are some eyewitness accounts of people who claim to have seen Shambhala, as well as other underground cities and even an alien civilization. However, photographs or further testimonies are strictly forbidden by the monks. In the Chinese province of Hunan, complementary tunnel systems are found on the southern shore of Lake Dongting as well as southwest of the city of Wuhan. There, Chinese archaeologists discovered the entrance to an underground labyrinth in a circular pyramid construction. Here too, the stone walls were unusually smooth and appeared to have been carefully worked. Numerous drawings in the caves are said to show, in addition to some simple hunting scenes, entities wearing unusual clothing and appearing incongruous, exalted, or like gods compared to the rest of the depictions. While humans in the paintings hunt with spears, the alien-like beings seem to fly above the humans, watch over them, or dwell among them as some sort of superhuman. The halls under the pyramids of Giza. According to legend, there are secret halls, rooms, and passages under the pyramids and especially under the Sphinx in Egypt. According to some parascientific theories, a super race once retreated there into the depths of the earth. These entities are said to have a considerable influence on the Egyptian image of the gods or to be identical with their deities. According to an old tradition, under the paws of the Sphinx is a library of wisdom, which contains all knowledge about this world and the cosmos. Although investigations are said to have taken place, no rooms have been found so far. Some alternative researchers claim that the rooms are much deeper than previously thought. In fact, there are reports that shortly after the Sphinx was uncovered, a worker came across numerous rooms and shafts inside. He and a summoned scientist would have suddenly found themselves standing inside front of a door protected by a semi-transparent curtain, or rather a strange energy. It was impossible for the two men to cross this paw. This happened in the year 1818. In the present time, scientists claim that there are no premises in or under the Sphinx. The entrance to the inner rooms is said to have been on the back as well as under the ears, and amazingly, there are traces there today that allow us to draw conclusions that the entrances were sealed with cement not so long ago. What can, or must, we now think about these discoveries? Could the sailor's life jacket have reached Russia through secret tunnel systems? Is it possible that the sailor survived and got into one of the tunnel systems either knowingly or by accident? The CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, has been known to gather information that others can't, while keeping them under close watch. The CIA's main focus is to protect the United States from enemies within and without, and it does this by knowing almost everything about any potential enemy. The CIA has been able to gather information about lost civilizations that the public didn't know about until they declassified some of those documents. Ancient Egyptians. The ancient Egyptians are best known for their pyramidal tombs used to bury their pharaohs, but is that all there is to it? Declassified documents on the Great Pyramids have shown that no single mummy or hieroglyph is pointing to the use of the Great Pyramids as tombs. The fact that each block used to construct the pyramid might weigh up to 20 tons was a significant aspect of the pyramids. Moving such blocks now would be extremely expensive and time-consuming, but the ancient Egyptians managed to move more than 1 million of them. Any way you look at it, it's horrifying that such a primitive culture was capable of something that our highly developed technology only recently made possible. The height at which pyramids stood was only bested 4,000 years after by the Lincoln Cathedral, making it even more marvelous how they built it in the first place. Certain things about the pyramids are still baffling, such as the internal temperature that's kept at about 20 degrees Celsius all the time, when the surroundings are hot as 50 to 60 degrees Celsius. Easter Island. Easter Island is an island in special territory of Chile located in the southeast Pacific Ocean at the southernmost end of the Polynesian Triangle in Oceania, Rapa Nui Spanish, Isle de Pasco. The island is best known for its roughly 1,000 still-standing moai, or gigantic statues, that were made by the pre-Rapa Nui people. Easter Island was designated a World Heritage Site by UNESCO in 1995. The majority of the island is protected within Rapa Nui National Park. On the exact date that the island's Polynesian residents arrived, experts dispute. A 2007 study uncovered convincing evidence that they arrived closer to 1,200 than many in the research community had previously claimed they did. The island's numerous gigantic stone moai and other artifacts are proof that the people who lived there developed a prosperous and hardworking civilization. However, the introduction of the Polynesian rat and the clearance of land for farming contributed to a steady loss of forest cover. The population of the island was believed to be between 2,000 and 3,000 people at the time of European settlement in 1722. The population decreased further due to European diseases, Peruvian slave raiding operations in the 1860s, and emigration to other islands like Tahiti, reaching a low of 111 indigenous people in 1877. In the 21st century, it would be understandable for people to reach the island. During the year 1200, that would be an impossible task as the island is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, at least thousands of miles away from land. Yet there they are, and even built and arranged the moai statues, are monolithic human figures carved by Rapa Nui, Easter Island in eastern Polynesia, between the years 1250 and 1500 by the Rapa Nui people. Hundreds were brought from the main moai quarry, Ranu Raraku, and placed on stone platforms known as ahu around the island. However, just about half of them are still there. Nearly all moai have disproportionately big heads that are 3/8 the size of the entire statue and lack legs. The moai are primarily the live faces of deified ancestors, Aringa Ora. Aringaora Ada Timpuna. When Europeans first arrived on the island in 1722 and at the beginning of the 19th century, perhaps as a result of European contact or both, the sculptures were still looking inland across their clan territory. It is regarded as a tremendously creative and physical feat that more than 900 statues could be produced and transported. The Paro Moai, the biggest one ever built, stood about 10 meters, 33 feet tall, and weighed 82 tons, 81 long tons, 90 short tons. The tallest and heaviest Moai ever built, Ahu Tangariki's Moai, weighing 86 tons, 85 long tons, 95 short tons. If one incomplete sculpture were finished, it would stand roughly 21 meters, 69 feet tall, and weigh between 145 and 165 tons. 143 to 162 long tons, 160 to 182 short tons. As of 2023, statues are still being found. The ancient civilization of Lemuria. The declassified file tells that Easter Island is a broken piece of a lost continent called Mu, also called Lemuria, that sank. The ancient civilization of Lemuria existed before and during the time of Atlantis. It is believed to have been largely in the southern Pacific Ocean. City of Baalbek. Rome took over the city of Baalbek. The Baalbek Temple of Jupiter was constructed during the rule of the Roman Empire and is still standing today amid the city's ruins. Stones that had been cut and quarried earlier in the site's history were utilized to construct buildings by the Romans. There are known foundation stones from earlier civilizations that have not been moved. This explains why the Temple of Jupiter's foundation and other places near Baalbek are excessively vast. The foundation stones may have already been there. Some of the cornerstones are quite enormous. One of the greatest archaeological mysteries in history is the origin of the Baalbek monoliths and stones. The area where Baalbek is located has probably been inhabited since around 9000 BCE, or almost as long as humans have engaged in agriculture and other sedentary occupations. Over the millennia, what probably began as a tiny town or village expanded to become one of the most important holy sites in the ancient Middle East. The Phoenicians were the ones who initially started major construction in Baalbek, and it was they who built a huge temple for the Phoenician sky god Baal. Baalbek was a well-liked destination for pilgrimages from all across the region, since Baal was one of the most significant gods in the Phoenician pantheon. The Cataclysms. Declassified and sanitized documents from the CIA written by John Thomas speaking about recurring destructions that have laid waste to civilizations and changed the Earth in multiple ways. The beginning pages talk about disasters that would happen all across the world, winds and waters ravaging Europe, mountains shaking in California, and the disappearance of the sands of the Sahara in the wake of nature's wrath. The author also makes mention of our time joining Noah, Adam and Eve, Atlantis, Mu, and Olympus. The author's description of these cataclysms is one of a regulator that checks the human population. If this is 100% accurate, then it explains why there are such abrupt shifts and errors and erasure of most of the evidence of civilizations during those eras. He also mentioned long-forgotten scientists who found remains of these cataclysms, the likes of J. Andre Deluc, von Buch, Escher, and Forel, who all agreed that the cause of these cataclysms was the Earth's sudden revolutions of its surface. The Lost City of Atlantis. We know exactly when and where the legend of Atlantis initially originated, unlike many legends whose beginnings are shrouded in mystery. Two of Plato's dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias, which were written around 360 BC, originally related to the story. Atlantis was significantly different from the Atlantis that Plato depicted in his myth, despite the fact that it is frequently seen today as a tranquil utopia. Professor of Archaeology Ken Feder writes in his book Encyclopedia of Dubious Archaeology, Atlantis is not a place to be venerated or copied at all. Atlantis was hardly an ideal society. Atlantis, on the other hand, represents a materially prosperous, technologically advanced. The Atlantis narrative, as propagated in Plato's morality play, is more about the city's valiant competitor, Athens, than a lost civilization. If Atlantis were discovered whole and inhabited today, its inhabitants would undoubtedly try to kill and enslave us all. One interesting thing is how Chan Thomas related the cataclysms of 11,550 years ago to the destruction of Atlantis City. Geographer Pomponius Mela lived in ancient Rome. This Roman geographer, who is not as well known as he ought to be, produced a map of the world that showed the then current geography of the planet. Less than 100 standard print pages make up his book, De Situ Orbis Libri III, and one site in particular is very interesting. It might be a hint to Atlantis. It's depicted to be directly at the eye of the Sahara, the Richard structure. The Ice Age. The existence or extension of continental and polar ice sheets and alpine glaciers occurs during the Ice Age, which is a protracted period of cooling of the Earth's surface and atmosphere. The climate on Earth varies between ice ages and greenhouse times, when the world is devoid of glaciers. There is a glacier on Earth right now. Intermittent mild periods within an ice age are referred to as interglacials or interstadials, and discrete pulses of cold temperatures within an ice range are referred to as glacial periods, or alternately glacials, glaciations, glacial stages, stadials, stades, or colloquially ice ages. A large amount of ice sheets in both the northern and southern hemispheres are implied by the term ice age in glaciology. According to this definition, the Heliocene is an interglacial epoch on Earth. The next glacial epoch, which would otherwise start in about 50,000 years, is anticipated to be postponed by 100 to 500,000 years due to the amount of man-made greenhouse gases released into the Earth's seas and atmosphere. The declassified documents of John Thomas mentions a deep freezing that followed melting of ice caps that could have disrupted the Gulf Stream, leading to findings of frozen mammoths that still have poses of eating and the likes. Geomagnetic pole shifts. An alteration in a planet's magnetic field that causes magnetic north and magnetic south to alternate places is known as a geomagnetic reversal, not to be confused with geographic north and geographic south. The primary direction of the Earth's field has cycled between times of normal polarity, when it was the same as it is now, and reverse polarity, when it was the opposite. These intervals are known as chrones. Statistics show that reversal occurrences are random. Over the past 83 million years, there have been at least 183 reversals, on average once every 450,000 years. The Bruns-Matthei reversal, the most recent, occurred 780,000 years ago, though estimates of how rapidly it occurred vary greatly. According to some sources, the average length of time for the four most recent reversals has been roughly 7,000 years. According to Clement, this length varies with latitude, being shorter at low latitudes and longer at mid and high latitudes. A full reversal normally lasts between 2,000 and 12,000 years, though this can vary. Although there have been instances of the field reversing globally lasting many hundreds of years, such as the Lechamp excursion, these events are categorized as excursions rather than complete geomagnetic reversals. Large, quick directional excursions are frequently found in stable polarity chrones. These excursions happen more frequently than reversals and may be interpreted as failed reversals. In the liquid outer core, but not in the solid inner core, the field reverses during such an excursion. Diffusion occurs over time frames of 500 years or less in the liquid outer core and over 3,000 years or more in the solid inner core. These facts make it hard to believe that in Chan Thomas's writings, he made mention of such a shift that occurred within 1/3 of a day, which is incredibly hard to believe for most, but would be cataclysmic happenings. It would seem a bit plausible that something like this would occur. He explained that this reversal was the result of an explosion deep in the Earth's crust that wreaked havoc over 6 days after the reversal. Planet 9. A potential 9th planet in the solar system's outermost region is known as Planet 9. Extreme Trans-Neptunian Objects, ETNOs, which orbit the Sun at an average distance greater than 250 times that of Earth, have an odd clustering of orbits that may be caused by its gravitational forces. These ETNOs' orbits are also inclined, and they frequently make their closest encounters to the Sun in a single sector. These alignments imply that a planet that has not yet been found may be guiding the orbits of the farthest known solar system's objects. However, other astronomers dispute this conclusion and claim that the grouping of the ETNO's orbits is actually the product of observational biases brought on by the challenge of finding and following these objects. According to earlier calculations, this fictitious planet would have been 5 to 10 times the mass of Earth, with an extended orbit 400 to 800 times further from the Sun than Earth. After the orbit estimate was improved in 2021, a semi-major axis of 380 plus 140, 80 AU, was determined. This was then changed to 460 plus 160, 100 AU shortly after. Planet 9 may be the core of a huge planet that Jupiter evicted from its original orbit, according to theories put forth by Konstantin Batygin and Michael E. Brown. Others suggest that the planet evolved on a far-off orbit, was captured from another star, or was once a renegade planet. There is also a theory that the planet could be linked to the geomagnetic changes on Earth. CIA documents declassified and sanitized reveal so many shocking secrets that change our view on history. The document shows missing and skipped pages indicating that there are even more shocking details that the CIA has withheld that could shale our knowledge again. You probably all know stories and traditions that tell about giants. Much of it was pushed into the realm of fantasy and fairy tales for centuries, until real archaeological finds proved otherwise. Did giants really exist? And if so, why is their existence concealed? Giants in religion and mythology. In fairy tales and legends around the world, the existence of giants is actually no big deal. They are as commonplace as dwarves, elves, and gnomes. But let's leave the world of fairy tales and myths aside for a moment and look at the major world religions. In Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, giants are often depicted as superhuman, gigantic beings. As mixed beings of humans and gods, the Nephilim worked in the traditions of the Old Testament, and of course in Christian mythology, we know the story of Goliath, the Philistine giant who was fought by David. In Hinduism, giants known as asuras or rakshasas play an important role as antagonists of the gods and divine beings. In Hindu epics such as the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, giants appear as powerful demons fought by heroes to preserve the balance between good and evil. In Buddhism, giants are mentioned in the Pali Canon, among other places. They usually appear as parts of folk traditions and symbolize human vices such as greed and anger, which must be overcome to attain spiritual enlightenment. It was only in modern times that giants suddenly became beloved and appeared in the stories of Roald Dahl and the Harry Potter series, among others, where the giant Hagrid plays a key, positive role. Among the Sumerians, an ancient Mesopotamian civilization, giants were known as Anunnaki. They were considered divine beings who played an important role in the creation and guidance of the world. In Sumerian myths, giants are often present as crucial players in epic stories. To this day, scholars and religious experts argue over whether the giants in the stories were true flesh and blood entities or purely archetypal concepts. Real giants, do they exist? Many consider the story of Goliath the giant, who was tricked by little David, to be the most authentic depiction of an ancient giant. Goliath is described in the Bible in the first book of Samuel, chapter 17. Then there came out of the camp of the Philistine a fighting man whose name was Goliath, and he was of Gath. He was 6 cubits and a span tall. 6 cubits and a span equals a little over 10 feet. Goliath is not described as a magical or divine being at any point in the story, but as a fighter like everyone else, only he was just unusually tall. Goliath fought as a Philistine against the Israelites, and the much smaller David gladly accepted the challenge. With a slingshot, David brought down the giant instantly and prevented a war. It is often speculated whether Goliath the Philistine may have suffered from pathological growth in size. Acromegaly occurs when the pituitary gland secretes too much growth hormone. The disease is rare overall, yet it does occur. The tallest man in modern times, Robert Wadlow, suffered from pathological growth in height, reaching a stately 2.72 meters. However, Wadlow's bones and musculature suffered from the enormous size. The young man could barely walk without aids and died of heart failure at the age of only 22. Even the current tallest man in the world, Sultan Kozan, has to walk with a cane because his bone growth can't quite compensate for the increase in size. Andre the Giant shows that not all people with enormous height growth have to be physically frail. Andre the Giant was a true giant, born in Grenoble, France in 1946. He grew to only 2.24 meters tall, but weighed an impressive 275 kilograms and appeared as a popular wrestler in the 1960s. Andre was admired for his strength and size and was known for his impressive matches and feuds with other wrestling legends like Hulk Hogan. However, even the popular Andre didn't reach too old an age. He passed away on January 27, 1993, at the age of only 46. Nephilim, the mysterious giants of Christianity. In the Old Testament, in addition to Goliath, a fighter who appears consistently human, appear the Nephilim, mysterious figures who are involved in the struggle of good against evil. In Genesis chapter 6, the giants appear as mixed creatures of human women and god men. But when men began to multiply on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of the gods saw how beautiful the daughters of men were, and they took from them all whom they wished. In those days the giants lived on the earth, and even later, when the sons of gods went into the daughters of men and they bore them children. These are the heroes of ancient times, the famous men. Unfortunately, the official Bible gives no further information about who or what exactly the Nephilim were. Some scholars interpret them as descendants of angels and human women. This approach states that the sons of gods were fallen angels who mated with the daughters of men, resulting in the Nephilim. In the scientific community, there are many different theories and thoughts about the Nephilim. Some believe they are purely mythological figures used in stories of early history to convey moral or religious teachings. Others see the mention of the Nephilim as an indication of the diversity of beliefs and myths in the ancient world. They could serve as a symbol of the mysterious, unknown, or supernatural in the human imagination. Some scholars search for possible historical or archaeological evidence of the existence of the Nephilim, but so far there is no clear evidence that they actually existed. In pre-astronautics and among esotericists, the Nephilim of the Bible are a reference to an intermingling between humans and very large entities that were thought to be gods, but were very likely extraterrestrials. These theories speculate about a possible genetic manipulation or breeding carried out by extraterrestrials to create on Earth a race that was initially intended to work in mines in Mesopotamia and eventually, after the departure of the god beings, were left to fend for themselves. The Old Testament unfortunately does not further describe the deeds of the Nephilim. Historians put hope in the Bible writings which were found near the Dead Sea. Their individual fragments are to describe the Nephilim and their role in the history of mankind, as well as more near. However, up to now the writings are present only in fragments and fragments. A clear picture has not emerged so far. Certain theories about the Nephilim coincide with the Sumerian legends, which are considered the direct precursors of the Christian traditions in the Old Testament. Giants among the Sumerians. Gilgamesh is a central figure in Sumerian gods and religion. The prominent figure is described as a semi-divine king and extremely powerful and strong. While it is not specifically mentioned that he was a giant, numerous illustrations show the human as oversized, and thus Gilgamesh sometimes carries a full-grown male lion under his arm like a lapdog. Gilgamesh was 2/3 god and 1/3 human, as his father was a god and his mother was a mortal woman. His strength and abilities were extraordinary, and he performed many heroic deeds and passed numerous adventures. The second spiritual pillar of the Sumerian culture was formed by the Anunnaki, godlike supermen or entities who are also often depicted oversized in effigies. Historians and archaeologists today push the representation of the Sumerians and other peoples predominantly in the realms of the legends because around the giant stories and mysteries there is a small problem. No bones or skeletons have ever been officially found that point to the true existence of giants. At least, that's what official statements on the subject say, but if we look closer, we will soon realize that this is not so. Giants all over the world. The U.S.-American amateur archaeologist Ralph Glidden discovered several cemeteries about 100 years ago where unusually large people were buried. Glidden is said to have unearthed the skeletons of about 3,000 people who were 2.2 to 2.6 meters tall and had hands with 6 fingers. These giants lived 5,000 to 7,000 years ago on some small islands off the coast of what is now California. Glidden's find mysteriously disappeared, and all that remained were a few photos that proved that the excavations really existed. In the last 2 centuries, skeletons of giants have been repeatedly excavated on the American continent, both in North America and in South America. The only evidence of these finds today are often newspaper reports, which seem rather insignificant. There is no trace of the artifacts themselves. The discovery of the Guadalupe woman, whose half-skeleton suggested that the real woman must have once been around 5 meters tall, also became world famous. The legends of the U.S. indigenous population also tell of tall, light-skinned giants with reddish hair. But strangely enough, all archaeological findings around these giants have also disappeared over time. So did a finger of a giant that turned up in Egypt in the 1980s. The finger was offered for sale to a Swiss adventurer and amateur archaeologist. Since the man lacked the money, he turned to the German Bild newspaper. After the latter showed interest and promised support, the Swiss traveled back to Egypt, but he was unable to locate the antique dealer who had offered the finger a few weeks earlier. All this seems most strange and dubious. Quite a few people would like to see another clear indication of the existence of giants in structures that are oversized or contain stones that can hardly be moved by humans alone. Many ancient temples or structures like those in the rock city of Petra are so oversized that they resemble giants. The largest stone ever moved for construction purposes, the 1,000-ton Stone of the South at the Baalbek Temple complex, is said to have been brought there by giants. Some also rumor that structures like the pyramids were built by giants or supermen, and giants are also said to have been at work in the megalithic structures at Stonehenge, Karnak, and Avebury. But officially, everything went on here with completely normal forces, and giants existed, allegedly, only in the fantasies of humans.
Researchers are working meticulously to clarify our history as a species on this earth as completely as possible. Questions like, where do we come from, or what led to the fact that from apes humans became, and is this history at all true, occupy not only scientists but also completely normal humans. The fact is that there is evidence that humans have slowly evolved from primordial types of hominids, but then a leap in evolution took place that until today no one can explain. Can the discovery of a fossil skull that points to an entirely new human species finally close that gap? We are looking into the matter. Stay tuned and let us surprise you. The story of human evolution keeps changing. Just a few years ago, researchers thought modern humans were only a few tens to hundreds of thousands of years old. Then findings appeared that were 200,000 years old, and some species that were already very similar to us may have lived 500,000 years ago, and possibly longer. At the same time, there have always been various human-like species on Earth, and it is not yet clear whether they are related to the prehistoric humans that once walked from Africa into the world, or whether they form entirely new species. All in all, it shows up that over the entire evolution time humans existed, who were further developed, while there were at the same time also human types, which were more primitive. So far, no uniform picture shows up, and again surprises emerge. Not so long ago, for example, researchers discovered that Neanderthal man had not died out, as had long been assumed, but had merged genetically into Homo sapiens. But even this groundbreaking discovery does not quite explain how half-savages became humans, who today use computers, build cities, and will soon begin to colonize outer space. Does Dragon Man provide answers? In the journal The Innovation, researchers published surprising results about a whole new species that no one had expected. The well-preserved skull, excavated in 1933 in Harbin in northeastern China, is between 138,000 and 309,000 years old. It probably came from a man who had been around 50 years old, which had been an unusual age for a human type of those eras. The Harbin skull has been called the most significant fossil found within the past 50 years by researchers at the Hebei Jiao University Geoscience Museum in China. The skull could not only rewrite the history of mankind, but shows completely new aspects of hominid evolution in East Asia and China. Co-author of the study is Professor Chris Stringer of the Natural History Museum in London, and this said to the news channel CNN. We have just made the beginning of what will be years of study of this fascinating fossil. Lead author Shijun Ni is a research professor at the Chinese Academy of Sciences and deputy director of the Central Laboratory of Vertebrate Evolution and Human Origin History. Professor Ni believes that the questions of where we really came from and how we evolved have by no means been adequately resolved to date. Despite the many findings, too many questions remain unanswered, and more new findings show that we need to realize that we may not know all the pieces of the puzzle by a long shot. According to researchers, the so-called Dragon Man belongs to a previously unrecognized Stone Age human species. What is particularly intriguing is that he is the closest known relative of modern humans, but is not himself a species directly related to modern humans. Until now, Neanderthal man was considered this closest relative. Neanderthal man was long considered a primitive and inferior species to early Homo erectus or Homo sapiens. Neanderthals exhibited a slightly different body structure, had a different vertebral structure, and more ribs than humans. Nevertheless, there was apparently intermingling of the two species. Neanderthal blood flows today probably also in you and in me. But how is it now with the dragon man from China? Did he form an own species which perished, or did he also merge into modern Asian human types? Can we distinguish the species man then at all still from other hominids? As it was made for a long time, or was everything 200,000 years ago and more already a multi-culti community, which mixed itself colorfully among themselves and formed exactly what today modern types of man are? What did the dragon man look like? To clarify similarities and differences in appearance, scientists reconstructed the faces of the people. In fact, based on such reconstructions, it was also possible to determine the similarity of certain skull finds with modern humans, so that it suddenly became clear that these early humans were not so dissimilar to today's humans. If one would put them in a suit or in a modern dress, the next related species on a shopping street would not stand out so much, even if they supposedly still belong to relatively primitive species of man. Reconstructions of the dragon man have shown him to have similarities to types of humans resembling indigenous peoples. He was powerfully built and robust. He would have had a broad face, deep-set eyes, large teeth, a broad nose and flat forehead, and flat and delicate cheekbones. Despite his enormous skull, the size of his brain would be similar to ours. However, little is known about its way of life. The skull of the dragon man was found in one of the coldest places in China. This species had definitely developed strategies to survive in a cooler climate zone. Consequently, this human was able to access food resources and probably wore warming clothing. New insights into human evolution. Analysis suggests that dragon man is more closely related to Homo sapiens than to Neanderthal man. The research team believes it is one of the most completely preserved early human skull fossils ever discovered, and that this type of human is distinct from all other human species. Chinese researchers rate the find as one of the most important among all the fossils that traced human history over the last million years. Professor Stringer told the BBC, "What we have here is a separate branch of humanity that was not on its way to becoming Homo sapiens, but represents a long separate lineage that evolved in the region for several 100,000 years and eventually disappeared." Professor Ni was pleased with the find, which was so well preserved, and emphasized that the skull showed all the details necessary to place the find in the long chain of human evolution. The origin of modern humans is indeed an intricate web, and the perfectly preserved Chinese Harbin skull provides even more evidence that human evolution was not a simple tree of descent, but a dense, branching undergrowth about which we are far from knowing everything. Enigmatic human types. Neanderthals are familiar to most people today. Less well known is the Denisovan. This archaic type of man was long lumped together with the Neanderthal. Only later did DNA analysis of bone finds show it to be a distinct species. The first physical evidence of their existence was found in Denisova Cave in the Altai Mountains of Siberia. The fossils include a finger bone, a few teeth, and a small fragment of a skull. Denisovan DNA is found in the genomes of some modern human populations, notably people from Melanesia and some indigenous groups in Asia. This suggests that Denisovans, like Neanderthals, also merged into humans and did not actually die out. Unfortunately, fossils of this species were not as well preserved as the dragon man's skull. Little is known regarding the physical characteristics of these hominids. The few fossils that do exist provided evidence of robust features that differed significantly in detail from modern humans, as well as Neanderthals. Nevertheless, the DNA samples also proved that Neanderthals and Denisovans must have shared common ancestors. However, this gap in the species family tree has not yet been closed and indicates that there are even more unknown types of humans. Occasionally, Homo heidelbergensis is seen as the common ancestor of the two, and then also a distant relative of modern humans. Homo heidelbergensis lived about 600,000 to 200,000 years ago. Fossils were first discovered near Heidelberg. However, Homo heidelbergensis has also been shown to have lived in other areas of Europe and in Africa. Characteristic features include a large brain, a pronounced over-eye bulge, and a robust physique. Tools and hunting evidence show that this species was also already culturally and cognitively developed. How old are humans really? The oldest known human fossils come from Africa. All signs indicate that the evolution of man began there. Monkeys are considered to be the primeval ancestors since they show a great resemblance to early human types. Nevertheless, this descent is not completely clarified until today. It remains above all the question how and by which trigger the species humans should have developed from an animal species, which itself remained unchanged until today, which concerns behavior and cognition. Monkeys have, of course, also evolved over the hundreds of thousands and millions of years, but they still live in trees and jungle areas and behave as well as feed like animals. Similarities between very early hominids and apes are unmistakable, and some very early species probably still use the forelimbs to support themselves, but it remains a big question mark whether humans evolved from an ape-like species that has not survived in its primitive form today. This species could have been completely absorbed into humans and the many precursors. For researchers, it would be, of course, a treat to find this ape species respectively preserved fossils. One of the oldest known fossils is Sahelanthropus tchadensis, discovered in Chad and dated to about 7 million years ago. This fossil was given the name Tu Mai. It shows features related to both humans and chimpanzees. Another remarkable fossil is Ardipithecus ramidus, discovered in Ethiopia about 4.4 million years ago. This early hominid shows a mixture of walking on two legs, as well as distinctive features in the finger limbs, indicating that this early hominid could still shimmy from branch to branch. For a long time, Lucy was considered the oldest human-like fossil. But Lucy, or better the Australopithecus afarensis, lived only 3.2 million years ago, and is thus only half as old as the oldest evidence of the development of mankind. The exact time period when modern humans, Homo sapiens, appeared is the subject of long scientific debate. Fossils from Jebel Irhoud in Morocco currently date our species to about 300,000 years ago. A skull fragment from Epidaurus in southern Greece may be the oldest modern human fossil outside of Africa. The find is about 210,000 years old. However, we cannot rule out the possibility that more fossils will be found that will overturn this picture and add more exciting facts to human history. What do you think about the development of mankind? Are we really strongly mutated apes that have evolved over millions of years, and what do you think has triggered this development?